Okay, good evening, everybody. We are in the middle of chapter 21. Just as the catching up, everybody. Um, the first part of this chapter was actually taking takeoff or continuation of the prior chapter in 20. In chapter 20, we saw the concept that there is nothing that is detached from Hashem, meaning when Hashem created the world, before Hashem created the world, after he created the world, Hashem remained the exact same thing. And not only that, but there's nothing that is, from God's perspective, that's detached from Hashem. This chapter is focusing on the topic of speech, the difference between human speech and the speech of Hashem. By us, we have a thought. It could start in the heart, move its way up to the head. Until we speak, it's part of us, it's inside of us, it's hidden. And let's say, for example, I'm thinking like, man, I'm really tired and I want to go to sleep. I'm not, because I want to teach right now. But in theory, I'm not tired right now in theory. So in any case, so let's say I'm thinking like, I really want to go to sleep, but I don't express it. It's hidden inside of me. When I verbalize it, it's been revealed. So now you know how I feel. It doesn't work that way with Hashem. The way it works with Hashem is that whereas by us, it is hidden and becomes revealed when we speak, by Hashem, Hashem's dibur, and we keep putting that in quotes, is revelation. It doesn't mean Hashem speaks. It means that something comes into existence or something happens and is brought about by Hashem's, what we will call speech, even though it's not speech. What's the difference between Hashem's speech and ours, besides the fact that it's not really talking, is that it's not a separate entity from Hashem. Once I have said words, they're gone from me. They're recorded forever on YouTube, or someone can hear them. They're now in someone else's mind. They're no longer a part of me. I can go to sleep and my words are still out there. Someone can play this video and can hear the words. It has nothing to do with me anymore directly. It's not connected to me. It doesn't rely on me to exist. But it's a revelation of my thoughts. By Hashem's dibur, his speech is his revelation, but it remains a part of him. And that's what the rest of this chapter is really going to try to help us understand. I'm going to put on the screen the text, and we're not going to look at any commentary from Rav Steinsaltz or anything else, just the text, because I'm going to go through it slowly. Screen. Of course, you have to know that this is chapter 21, part 2. Okay, now that we got that out of the way, make this bigger so you can see it better. Okay, so we're saying that Hashem's speech in an anthropomorphic fashion is his gilui, is his revelation. And that is, or those are, the 10 utterances that Hashem used to create the world. Remember, we talked about this before, where Hashem says, Yehi or, let there be light. Yehi rakia, let there be a firmament. Yehi, whatever else it would be, let there be this, let there be that. Those are the 10 statements or 10 utterances of Hashem. And it was not a statement and then something comes into being. This is going to be a little bit hard to understand at first till we go through the rest of this chapter. But it was Hashem's revelation. We'll see what that means in a minute. And so is true when it comes to Tanakh, Torah, Nevi'im, Uktuvim. Whatever a Navi, whatever a prophet was able to acquire, to hear, to understand of Hashem, Hashem was revealing himself to the prophet. What does that mean? It means that if I speak to you, I tell you what I'm thinking. Now it's in your head. I move along, and now you carry that information with you. By Hashem, his revelation to the Nevi'im, his revelation to the prophets, did not make a separate thing. There's no separate words that are hanging out there that the Navi now has, but it is just a manifestation of what Hashem's desire is to communicate to human. And now he's going to get a little bit more clear. And it's as if He's only speaking now. Tanya is only telling us so that we can understand the words, that the speech and his thoughts, using human terms right now, of Hashem, are completely united as the original moment. What does that mean? Again, by us, well, he's going to explain this. By us, when we speak, there's the heart, it has a feeling, goes to the brain, still inside of me, now becomes separate of me. While it's inside of me, my thought, the words, it's still all one part. It's all part of me. It's going to tell us this now. Derech mashal, as an example. When it comes to a human being, his speech and his thought, while they are still inside of me, meaning I haven't expressed my thoughts yet. It's just in my mind. Or it's something even deeper inside of me. It's a desire, a feeling, a thought I have in my heart. It's like a feeling that's inside of me, or before it even gets, meaning even before it gets into my brain and it has been come into some kind of word structure in my head. Sha'az, when it does come into my head, otiyot ha'machashava v'adibur hazeh hanimshachot mechemda u'tshuka zo b'choach, that once this thought or this feeling is in my heart, it's still amorphous. There's no words yet to it. Comes into my head. Now it's starting to form words. At that moment, it's still a 100% part of me. Let's go to the next slide. Okay. I shouldn't have gone down yet. Sorry, I have one more line still on the other slide. Okay, so I'm right over here. Miuchadot. Let's say that when it comes to humans, the thoughts I'm having, the feelings I'm having are still united with me, with who I am. Umiuchadot sham betachlit hayichud b'shorasham, and those feelings, those words that may even be in my head, are still connected to the root. What does that mean? Shem hachochma, the seichel shebamoach. When I am thinking the words, if I'm thinking I am tired, and you don't hear that because I'm thinking it, it's still in my head. It's still a part of me, in my brain, in my knowledge, in my intellect. The seichel that's in my brain, or the feeling that I may have in my heart. Let's say I'm walking down the street and I'm feeling happy. I'm feeling sad. I'm feeling depressed. It may show on my face, but I'm not expressing anything. So the feeling I have is still inside of me and a part of me. I'm having a thought process. I'm thinking, it's a beautiful day. I'm thinking that. Again, you may see it somehow on my face, but I have not expressed it. It's still a part of me. Similarly, a word that I cannot say very easily. Similarly, I'm going to explain this expression in a minute because it sounds contradictory, because it says, it's not the first time Tanya's using this expression. And so too, literally, as a parable, which sounds like a contradiction, the speech and thought of Hashem are united. They never leave God. What we will call speech and what we will call his thoughts never leave him, because if they left Hashem, there'll be something that's not a part of Hashem, and Hashem is perfect. Hashem is 100, is only one. Even after his quote speech would leave him, while he creates worlds. He said this in the last chapter, that the speech that Hashem used to create the world, to create human beings, to create animal kingdom, to create the universe, Hashem remained the same before and after. It's still one Hashem. There's nothing that left God and is no longer a part of God. Why is he going into such detail and over? He seems to be saying the same thing in different ways and all, because again, he's coming to some building blocks, which will help us in the next couple of chapters, which has been his style all along. Before I continue, we have to understand this expression here. He's used it before in the earlier chapters. The kacha mamash, and so too literally. Derech mashal, in the way of a parable. So it's either literally like this or it's a parable. Which is it? So the answer is it's both. Because Hashem remains perfect. Nothing separates from Hashem, literally. But for us to understand it, he has to give us a parable in a human terms. Let's continue from over here where it says ve'ein shum, right over here. Ve'ein shum shinui klal lefanav yitbarach. There is absolutely no change by Hashem whatsoever. Until now, we spoke about Hashem's complete unity. Remember the concept of ein od milvado. So, but it seems like things change. There was no world, and now there is a world. So, what do you mean Hashem doesn't change? So, listen to what he says here, because this is going to be part of the key for us to understand this chapter in its entirety. Where is that change? Ella el habiruim. I'm right over here. Right over here. Ella el habiruim. But from the perspective of those who he has created, hamekablim chiyutam mibechinat diburo yitbarach, who receive their life source from his speech, bibechinat yitziato kvar el hapoal bivriat olamot, which now his Hashem speech came into action, came to fruition as he created worlds. Shemitlabesh behem, that he is enrobed in them. Lachiotam aydehi shtalshalut me'ilal la'alul. I'm going to explain all of this, which brings about a human, or brings about existence from cause to effect. Okay, so from our perspective, there's a massive change. I was not existent. The world didn't exist. And now it does exist. It's a massive change. Hashem didn't change, which means only from our perspective, things have changed, right? The baby wasn't alive yet because the parents hadn't gotten married. Then they get married and they have a baby. There was no baby, now there's a baby. Came into existence. Hashem didn't change. We see things that changed. But what does this mean that things change from ilah to alul, from cause to effect? I have to explain something to you before we read this inside. We have seen a long time ago the opening words of the Rambam, that the Rambam says that we have what our initial belief must be, that there is an initial cause to everything in this world, i.e. Hashem. And if we don't accept that, then there's nothing that could exist. That's pretty much how the Rambam starts off his work, the Yad HaChazakah. But what is this cause and effect? And then he's going to use the word tzimtzum. I'm just going to read a little bit more and then I'll explain. Let's take a look over here. So that Hashem's life source will come down through all kinds of I say tzimtzum in English, just as contractions, to the point where we can accept God's transmission of giving us life, and we will not completely incinerate or be obliterated. Okay, this is a lot of big words. What's he talking about? It's 7:15 at night, and because some of our brains, part of our brains have shut down already for the night, let me try and put this into a complicated topic, into a little bit more of a simplistic idea. Number one, I'm going to start from the second half and go work my way backwards. Let's say you're standing outside, it's nighttime, and someone takes one of these high-powered, very bright flashlights that has 500 lumens. That's a very powerful light, and turns it on your face. What are you going to do? You're going to go, right? You're getting blinded. Almost in some cases, you could be blinded. Don't start singing the song Blinded by the Light. Okay? So it's like it's blinding. So in order, if I want to shine this on you, but I don't want to hurt you, what do I have to do? I have to put up something like a screen in front of you, right? If I put a screen, if it's completely black or if it's completely solid, nothing's going to penetrate. But if I put something that's translucent, light will penetrate. Now, if it's a super bright light and I put just a thin sheet, like a bed sheet in front of it, it's still going to be very bright. But if I put a blanket that's somewhat translucent or another sheet, so now what I've done is I've cut down on the intensity of that light that's reaching your eyes. Because if I didn't, what would happen to your vision? God forbid, you could get blinded by this very strong light. Hashem gives us life. Hashem not only gives us life, gives everything existence its ability to exist. But if Hashem were to give us his full power, so to speak, we wouldn't exist because we couldn't accept this power of the dibur of Hashem, the speech of God to bring us into existence and to keep us sustained. And therefore, what does Hashem have to do? He has to put in these screens to kind of block that powerful light of Hashem, the life source of God. Now, let's go back to that example. I'm standing out here with this very powerful flashlight, right? And I turn it on. And, I can't see. And then I put a screen in front of it to block so it doesn't bother you as much. It's a lot less intense light. Did the source change? The source didn't change. Nothing changed in the source. The exact same light. What did change from your perspective? It changed. Why? Because now you can accept that light. So the Alter Rebbe, the Baal Tanya is telling us that trying to have us, this is the mashal, this is how he's trying to get us to understand, what do you mean Hashem doesn't change? We see things change. It only changes from our perspective. Because from our perspective, there seems sumim, there's contractions of Hashem's power, as it were, so that we can accept Hashem's power to enable us to have life, to enable the stars to be the stars and the sun and the moon and everything else in existence. And that's what he's talking about here by the fact that when Hashem's dibur, his speech, his giving us life, bringing out things into existence, whether it was the initial creation of the world or was it bringing all of us into this world, it doesn't change Hashem. Only from our perspective, things change. And by the way, if things change only from our perspective, that means it's in our hands how we view Hashem. We'll come back to that shortly. Let's take a look at the. Actually, I want to show you something. I wasn't gonna play because it's a topic of tzimtzum, but it's a little bit of a different perspective. In Kabbalah, the idea of tzimtzum, which he's talking about here too, we're talking about the tzimtzum of Hashem's power, so that it will not be overpowering. It will allow things to come into existence. There's another concept of tzimtzum that is similar idea. I'm going to show you a short video in a minute. But there's another place that you all have heard of before, that this idea of Hashem's overpowering quote unquote voice. The Midrash that tells us, it's stated in the Yalkut Shimoni, that when Hashem was giving the Torah, and we talked about this last chapter, that the first two of the Seret HaDibrot, the first two of the Ten Commandments, Hashem himself said. And the Gemara and the Midrash tells us that the power of the voice of Hashem. Now, was there an actual sound? Was it just in their heads? Again, it seems to be different opinions. That was so strong, it pushed people back hundreds of feet, miles. They died, and Hashem had to bring them back to life. So we already have this idea of that the power of Hashem is so strong when it is unfiltered. The tzimtzum can be looked at somewhat as a filter. If you're into photography at all, I don't know if you know, in one of my lifetimes, I was an amateur photographer. Besides taking pictures, I did some parties and stuff, but I also did a lot of nature photography. I sold at shows. It was a lot of fun. And I learned a lot about photography. And I just finished my career in photography as digital was coming on the scene. That's when you actually went to Photomat, printed pictures out, took them home, and you had to wait a few days to see what they actually looked like. And it wasn't instant gratification in the back of your phone. But part of that, when you learn about photography, is the flash. If you have it like super bright and it's going to do something, it's going to wash out your subject, and you learn about putting a filter not just on the lens, but also on the light. I one time went to a comedy show with a few friends, and I was sitting in the front row. Don't ever sit in the front row at a comedy show. And I took a picture with a flash. And then the guy stopped and he like all kinds of like, oh my God, did I never teach you don't put a flash on in a dark room? You're going to blind people. He started ripping me apart as part of his act. So had I put a not flash or put some kind of a filter on it, would have made a difference. So the same similar idea of it it seems to here. What I do want to show you is this brief video. Share sound. If I didn't. Nope, that's not what I want to share though. I want to share. Where is it? Okay, hold on 1 second. Sorry. Just give me a second. Put it up on the screen. Stop shit. Okay. I really do need sleep. What can I say? Okay, it's this one. I want to go back to the beginning. I want to put it on the slow speed, right? I mean, regular speed. This. Okay, let's go to screen share. Seems some here. And
the 5 books of Moses begin with the story of creation. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. But it does not clarify how it was possible for time and space, or the diverse forms of existence, or even the matter of matter itself to come into existence, when all that originally existed was God alone. So how did the beginning begin? We asked renowned teacher of Hasidus, Mrs. Shimona Tzukernik, to address this.
How did the beginning begin? The mystics tell us through a process called tzimtzum, translated as contraction. But what does that mean? God contracted himself in order to create the world. A useful analogy is speech. All speech, physiologically, conceptually, emotionally, requires contraction or a withholding or hiding. I can breathe. There's no obstruction of the air between my lungs and the outside world. But in speech, there is an obstruction, vibration with a vowel, oh, ah, and an actual blockage with a consonant, b, g, d. More than the physiological contraction that facilitates and allows for speech is a conceptual and emotional contraction. I have to tell you only this idea, and only in this way. I have to share with you only this emotion and not that emotion. I can later, but right now, I am transmitting this. In order to transmit this, I have to hide or withhold all of that. And that is an analogy of tzimtzum. In order for God to create the world,
keep in mind, I'm talking about there's different different usage of the word tzimtzum. One is the one I just talked to you before about, he's talking about now, these like almost screens that are put up to protect the power of Hashem from affecting you too hard and destroying you, so to speak. And now she can talk about tzimtzum, about in the perspective of the creation of the world.
he didn't do it the way we make something. He did it by withholding. It's not like God made a new entity that was outside of him. God simply hid all the aspects of his being, of that source, so that the world could emerge. So God didn't create anything in the sense of making something new. God allowed something to emerge by hiding every other aspect of his being.
Okay. If you understood it, great. If not, it's also fine, because it doesn't affect how we're going to move ahead. But I just wanted to show that to you as an example, another topic when it comes to tzimtzum. So let's go back to the text and pick it up from here. It says v'chol, right down here. I have a feeling that I don't have the whole text here. A second. I might have to go pull up some more. Okay, that's fine. Starting here, it says v'chol. I have to find it in my book here. Here it is. When Hashem puts up, does this contraction, so to speak, and the example I'm giving again is putting up these screens so to protect us, is a form of called hester panim, or hiding his face. Lastir ula'alim ha'or, in order to hide the light, v'achiyut, and the life source, hanimshach midiburo, that emanates from his speech, yitbarach, shelo yitgaleh bebechinat gilui rav, that it shouldn't be, you shouldn't be overexposed, shelo yichlu hatachtonim lekabel, that us in this lower world would be unable to accept. Again, this is still this long mashal, or parable, of what is this? What does it mean? This concept of tzimtzum. What does it mean? The concept that Hashem's speech does not change him. What does it mean? It's not a separate entity. Once again, I go back to this. When I put up this screen here to protect the amount of light coming out, nothing changed in the source. I didn't want to have it too strong in your face. V'lachen, what we hear now, right here. V'lachen, gam ken nidme lahem or v'chiyut hadibur shemakom baruch hu. Therefore, it also appears to them, to humans, that the light and life source of Hashem's speech, hamelubash bahem, that is clothed in, is enrobed in us, that we have, it would seem, therefore, from our perspective, that we are, and remember we said, remember the very, very, very beginning of the book, that we have in us a chelek eloka mima'al mamash. We have a piece of Hashem in us, literally, because we are an extension of Hashem. We talked about that a long time ago. But from our perspective, it would seem we are separate from Hashem. I say, okay, there's me, and here's Hashem. Oh, now I do need to, I'm sorry. I'm so not prepared tonight, it seems, right? I apologize. Let me just go to the screen and get the rest of this chapter on. Just give me 1 minute. Yeah. It's a good thing this isn't my first class. You'd probably drop it right away. Oh, that's interesting. Just get that here. Here, it's this. Just the last few lines of the chapter. Just cut and paste, copy. You get a 5-yard penalty for delay of game here. Okay, let's make it bigger, and then I'll be able to show it to you. Okay. Okay. But the Gabeya Kadosh Baruch Hu, from the perspective of Hashem, hopefully it's clear enough now that from our perspective, we seem to be separate from Hashem. But from the perspective of Hashem, Ein shum tzimtzum v'hester v'helem mastir u'ma'alim lefanav. Nothing changes Hashem. His hester panim, his hiding, so to speak, doesn't change the source. There is no difference. It doesn't make it smaller. It doesn't make him less. It doesn't change him Hashem at all. Uchashecha ki'ora, and dark is like light. What does that mean? That nothing, no perspective, no anything has changed in Hashem. Gam kirichtiv gam choshech lo yachshich mimcha. It's not like Hashem gets darker, so the light comes out, and Hashem gets darker, or Hashem gets brighter in the light. There's no concept by Hashem. It's all Hashem. Mishum she'ein hatzimtzumim v'halavushim davar nifrad mimenu. Because nothing is separate. These tzimtzumim are not separate from Hashem. I'm going to read to you a note that I have here that Rav Silverberg said, and I'm just going to read it to what he said. If a teacher, I'm going to take my glasses off here. If a teacher wants to teach a lofty concept, he may use a mashal, a parable, and through that mashal or that parable, the student understands the mashal. But the parable is never the original full idea. The parable is a form of tzimtzum. It's a form of contraction from the perspective of the student. But from the teacher's perspective, it's still the original thought. So too Hashem. Let me explain to what he's saying. Let's say I need to explain to someone who is 10 years old, what is the idea of algebra? Okay. Now, if I'm going to start talking about equations, I'm going to use a little younger because some of the kids at 10 years old, they're really doing early algebra. Let's say he's 6 years old, 5 years old. Talk about algebra. They already know what math is. They understand 2 plus 2 already. They're at that point. But I'm going to try and explain algebra. There's no way I'm going to start to say, okay, you have an unknown, we'll call it x. And x squared plus y equals 37. How we're going to solve by making both sides of the equation and doing the same. No way, unless this kid's a genius. So what might I do? I say, sometimes we don't know all the answers for a number, and we have to do something to give us an answer. Whatever, I may make up a parable using apples. But is the original idea that's in my head what algebra is, that change? Of course not. I had to, sorry for the expression, dumb it down so that the person could understand. I had to make it understandable, sometimes through a parable, sometimes through just giving a lot less information. But it doesn't change the original source. So too, when Hashem does these tzimtzumim, or these contractions to protect us, to allow us to come into existence, to allow everything to exist, to originally bring the world into existence, it didn't change Hashem. The original source doesn't change. Let's finish these last couple of words here. It says right here, it's not davar nifrad mimenu yitbarach chas v'shalom. It's not, God forbid, something separate from God. Ela kahaden kamtza de lavushe mine ube. He uses an example. It's like it's the turtle and its shell. Wherever the turtle goes, the shell goes. It's still one, right? The head may come out, it may go back in. The shell, it's still one turtle. I uses that expression. Maybe we'll see another time. כמו שכתוב, כי השם אלוקים, וכמו שכתוב במקום אחר ולכן קמא, כולה כלחשיב ממש. He ends this chapter with an expression that we learned about before. It's this expression right here. This one. Make it bold and make it red. Okay? Kameh, before God, kula k'lachashid mamash. Nothing seems to have any significance. What does that mean? Remember, we had this conundrum in the last chapter. If I'm so insignificant, then why does Hashem bring me into existence? Why should I even do anything that Hashem wants? If I'm a nothing. So he said, because the fact that Hashem chose me, that makes me significant, etc. But in and of itself, by ourselves, without Hashem, we're insignificant, right? Because we change and everything we do changes and the universe changes and all, but only Hashem remains static at all times. Always was, always will be. And therefore, from our perspective, it's only from our perspective that Hashem changes, it means we have the power. This is a building block for later in the book. We have the power to use that thought and say, you know what? Maybe I can start to connect to Hashem in a different way and see Hashem in a different light, so to speak. Maybe I can start doing a mitzvah in a different way, connect to Hashem in a different way. Because if everything really, I see Hashem as separate, or I'm distant from Hashem, I'm only distant from Hashem because I see it that way. Not Hashem. Hashem is right there. Again, these are going to help us to understand in coming chapters. We're not going to start the next chapter, but the next chapter is going to go a little bit more into depth of something we did very little in this chapter, which was the concept of anthropomorphism, the attributing human qualities to Hashem in order for us to understand. I do understand that this part of the book is a little bit, considering I was talking before the class earlier this evening with Mark, and we we're talking about how sometimes, the brain is very hard to get certain ideas at certain times of day, especially if you're tired. And especially in the winter when things are a little bit slower, it gets dark early and the brain starts to shut down earlier. And I'm saying that obviously is just a parable, not for real. I should hope that these are the kind of things that you sometimes have to just look at again and think about. And as we go further into the book, to really start, it'll start to come together and coalesce a little bit stronger. And hopefully I didn't make your brain hurt tonight. So I wish you all a good night, and we should have this all